Well, I wouldn't even thought about, go ahead and introduce myself. I'm Marissa Marbelli. I'm an independent historic preservation consultant based in Kingston. And since 2021, I've been a volunteer on the Buildings and Grounds Committee of the Reher Center for Immigrant Culture and History. Be careful when you say you're going to sign up to be on a building committee, a volunteer on a building committee. I thought that was going to be a passive role, and not so passive, but still very rewarding. So just to situate you, all of you, Kingston, we're on the west side. Right now we're on the east side of the Hudson River. Kingston's a little further north on the west side of the river near the mouth of the Rondout Creek that flows into the Hudson River. There we go. So Kingston's famous for its Stockade Historic District, which is one of the largest, or if not the largest, concentrations of New World Dutch stone houses. It's also the third oldest settlement in New York, after Albany and New York. And for the longest time, up into the mid-19th century, it was where most of the developed city was, this village town. And the Rondout, where the Reher Center is located today, really didn't come into fruition until 1828, when the Delaware and Hudson Canal was first opened, connecting the northwest corner of Pennsylvania coal country, bringing all that coal to the waterfront, which at that time was still called the Strand, and it comprised about a collection of 6 buildings or so, and a couple farms, large farms. So for much of Kingston history, the power was held by the old Dutch, English, French Huguenot families that lived in the stockade, and the Rondout was somewhat of an afterthought. Today, Kingston is a city of 24,000 people. We are the county seat and the only city in Ulster County. So I just mentioned the Delaware D&H Canal. I don't know if you see Bill Merchant here today. He is the executive director of the Delaware D&H Canal Museum, and it's an awesome institution. But anyway, the point of showing this slide is to point out that it's the D&H Canal that brought a population boom to the Rondout. All of these workers that worked on the canal worked for the company, whether building the canal or being boatsmen on the canal, created homes in the Rondout. And so that by the mid-19th century, the population of the Rondout comprised 50% of foreign-born residents, mostly German and Irish. So there was a big competition between the village of Kingston and the village of Rondout, which remained separate entities until 1872 when they merged. And so 1885, this is a photo of the Rondout, and we'll just go to the next slide. This is our building. It's a commercial building that was built in 1875. It's actually 2 buildings. I'll get there in just a second. And with apartments above a storefront. So this is the Rondout in 1906. Looking up Broadway, which is the main thoroughfare in the Rondout. It actually wasn't always the main. We had a couple other principal commercial corridors, but they were eradicated during urban renewal in the 1960s. But 1906, Rondout was a church. It's a holy place. We had 14 houses of worship, including 3 synagogues. And I mention the synagogues because our building, this is a photo actually from the mid-20th century, and the Reher Center comprises 2 buildings. There's the oven, the bakery building that had the oven room where the bread was made, and then next door is the retail storefront where the Reher family, beginning in 1908, sold bread that they baked in their ovens to the community. Frank Reher came with an immigrant from Krakow, Poland. He came through New York City, settled for a time in Brooklyn before migrating up to the Hudson Valley and establishing his bakery, a family-run bakery, which ran until 1982. thereabouts. And so the Reher Center has become a way of telling the story. It's a house museum, and I'll let our executive director talk about this concept of an urban house museum, but it's much more than a house museum because it's a way of telling the story of a neighborhood. It's a way of telling the story of a community that's no longer there, of a family, of a business, of food, of bread. There's nothing that connects us more culturally than food. And so this Sunday list was discovered when the building was donated to the Jewish Federation of Ulster County, and it's a Sunday delivery list. And through this list, we could tell who were customers at the time of the Reher Bakery, when the Reher Bakery was in business. And it's a lot, it's not just Jewish families, it's Catholic families, it's old Kingston families from the Stockade district that all were frequent customers at the bakery. And so through this list, it's a way of framing the story and talking about a larger neighborhood and a community. So this is Broadway again, looking up. The Reher Center is just beyond the curve, unfortunately, of the hill. It's a steep hill. And then, like so many cities and towns in the mid-20th century, we saw the misguided attempts at renewal. And I won't tell the whole story of urban renewal, but there is an excellent documentary produced by my friend Stephen Blaureis and Lynn Words that tells that story. And so this is the Rondout soon after all the demolition had been completed in 1975. And the whole eastern section, eastern half of the Rondout, this is public housing up here, had been removed, and so all that was left was the west side. And really, that's a testament to residents at the time who fought against a proposal that would have also eliminated this side as well. So if in an alternate universe is possible, we would have no historic fabric in the Rondout. And these 9 commercial buildings were what constituted the first historic district in the Rondout in 1974. And then it was expanded to 278 buildings 4 years later. And so this is the Reher Center today. And what we're looking at is up from an arterial highway 9W that goes over the Rondout Creek, over-designed, excessive in size, looking up an overly wide street that connects to historic Broadway or commercial corridor, and there's the Reher Center. And we're really the gateway building into the historic district. So that promise of renewal that we were told would come, it's still not there. We still don't see it. So our building looks out over a vacant parcel, large parcel. And so here is the historic district, the Rondout West Rand Historic District. Our building's right here. This is an urban renewal era neighborhood building. So really the commercial section of Rondout begins right at that corner. And there's that highway I was talking about and the bridge that goes over. And it's funny because it's a 4-way highway, and then you get up the hill and you go right back to two-lane road. So people, they speed and then you immediately go back down to 30 miles per hour. The highway is a useless highway. And then Kingston today, like I said, is a population of 24,000, and about 13% of our population is foreign-born. We have 70% Hispanic population, 40% from Mexico, also from Honduras, Guatemala, El Salvador. And I think right now it's a good place to turn it over to Marilyn, our preservation architect, who has been involved with adapting our building for a museum purpose since what year?
20 years.
20 years.
So the story of the Sewards and the story of the Rehers seem really far apart. We have immigrants here, we have landed gentry there, but I think what we'll see is that the story of preserving any of these buildings is the same. There's so many themes as to a crawl through documentation and research and project by project, just fighting to deal with the most critical issues. And because I work, I'm Maryland Capital and Preservation Architecture at Albany, and I work primarily with nonprofits, and so they never have enough money, and they always have a lot of problems. And what do we do, and how do we make progress? I think my presentation, if I had a name, would be "What can you get done in 20 years?" And for those of you who are part of nonprofit organizations, historical societies, etc., I hope I encourage you and don't discourage you, because it is a process. So, in the few slides I have, I want to take you from what the 99 building that's on the left side, the smaller, and that's the rear REAR of that in the upper left corner, through some construction projects. And the gentleman on the right, Jeff Miller, is probably the first person who had a vision for this property. Jaime Reher, who was the last survivor of the bakery, was befriended by and taken care of, as Marissa said, the Jewish Federation of Ulster County at the end of his life. And there was quite a struggle in the beginning, and I was there as to what is this? We have this building. Is it about a museum? Is it a center? Is it Jewish history? Is it immigration? What is it? And what do we want it to be? We have a building. So that's what I want to kind of walk us through. Is it started here with a vision of a single person. And I do realize, sitting and listening to Mitch's comments, is that unlike the Seward House and many other historic sites, of the 20 years, probably 15 of these years, the project has been undertaken by volunteers, no staff. So Jeff and Jeff's friends and others interested in the project started to understand and struggle with and work through the process of what do we want to do here and what might this place be. And it takes a core group of people, and that of course changes over time. And eventually you've got enough sense of what the project ahead is and what the critical needs are to bring it to the public. And then of course into some of the funding sources. Ours have been very similar to what we just saw in the Seward House. The building is so interesting because it is work and family life all combined. And on the left, that is the bakery room. You'll see that oven again. There is some of the dough mixing equipment. All of that was there. Upstairs, the Rehers had, it was as if I was going to my grandparents' house. It just moved out, and there was plastic on the sofa, and there was a big TV set, and all kinds of things that were so evocative of the family who lived there. So how do we put all those pieces together? And as an architect and as a technician, what do we do first? What do we need to do to protect the building? And then how can I help you, organization, in thinking through the critical steps and how to build public support and get public into the building? So as we speak, here's 99 Broadway is on the left. You'll see that again. I'll refer to it. 101 Broadway on the right. And in plan, north is up. In case I reference that, there's 99. It's a deep building that stone retaining wall that extends from Spring Street. Come back to that word spring. From Spring Street all the way down Broadway is kind of the bane of this project in my mind. But it's in the courtyard, it's exterior. It is that rear wall that I showed, rear REAR wall at 99 Broadway. This is how it started. There's that rear wall again, and a lot of water entry, again retaining wall at the exterior. 101 Broadway, underneath the retail shop, always had 2 or 3 or 4 inches of water and mud and yuck down there. And then the water, not only from the site, but coming in through the roof, and we went through buckets, and we went through temporary temporary plastic and tarps, and went through it all. One of the first grants that we got was a 2013 Environmental Protection Fund grant, and for those of you who are more current, that would be similar to the CFA or the REDC projects, now funded through historic preservation. We did some site work, removed the garage. There was some archaeology that was required. We did some initial site drainage. At 99 Broadway, again, that's the 2-story longer section, we rebuilt the whole north wall, which I'll show you soon, which was intended to be an interior wall. We repaired the second floor loft, and that was a storage area. We built and installed a new roof, and we did some stage 1 water improvements for interior drainage. I have to call them stage 1 because we haven't fully solved the problem yet. 101 Broadway, we did structural stabilization in the crawl space, and we did some additional drainage and water improvements in that area. There's the garage. There's some of the documentation that was some of the archaeological investigations that were done in order to approve our site work related to the removal of the garage, as well as that brick wall right behind the garage that was demolished. It was in terrible, terrible condition and rebuilt. The reasons it's concrete block is because it was, even in an early concept design, intended to be an interior wall, and you'll see that question come back as to where is that wall as part of the full intended build-out. So that first EPF project, we rebuilt the roof. We replaced the roof and its framing completely on the left. On the right, you can see the new framing of the roof, the new north wall, the flooring was redone, foundation work. We needed to stabilize the framing, the posts, and some of the joists. There's some of the site excavation work on your upper right, and there's that pesky retaining wall that we did some initial improvements for site drainage around. After the 2013 work, which I think we just determined took us about 5 or 6 years from when the grant was awarded till it was completed, there was a series of smaller and larger projects. That space on the left side, that is the second floor loft. It was a storage loft. Now it's a gallery. It's the primary space open to the public, and you can see that on the right, the recent installation. On the left is the retail store at 101, pretty much as we found it. And I think that's the space that most people responded to when they came into the building. It certainly wasn't some of the deeper areas of the building where there'd been so much water damage. And that was the initial space of the building open to the public, and you can see it pretty much in its current state on the right. This is 99, the oven room, and some cleanup, some stabilization, and just starting to open that space to the public at a very limited basis in order to get people into the building, which feels one of the most critical steps one can do on a project such as this. We're just completing a CFA project also through New York State Parks, and we had to do some final archaeology. We did some more site drainage. At 99 Broadway, we didn't, no, I'm sorry, that bullet under 99 Broadway, we already built that. We already built that wall. We did more water improvements for drainage, and we were able to do the cornice and window painting. And at 101 Broadway, which was the focus of this project, we did new roof framing with steel. We had a lot of complications there, new membrane roof, upper level masonry work. We repaired the cornice and repainted it, and we did window restoration. And there's our new roof on the upper left. On the upper right, once it's exposed, and we saw more surprise conditions and had to deal with that. So the project down in its midst. Bottom right is some of the roof edging and the parapets and the masonry work, and on the left is the new steel coming in as part of the roof project. There's our cornice as restored and repainted. There's our windows on the left, and they were removed from the site and beautifully, beautifully restored. See them there. And we did more drainage improvements, and the conditions are getting much, much better, but we don't control the source of the water. So that's really the same, that's our key problem is, okay, at some point we're just gonna have to accept this is the amount of water that comes into the building, and what are we gonna do with it? So it's gotten better each time, but that rear wall and both at the first floor level and down in the crawl space remain problematic. So we saw in the sewer project different studies and references to different studies and historic structure reports, and probably I assume that there was finishes analysis and things like that. This is an update of the historic structure report that we did in finished in 2022. And at this point, we're starting to talk about what is the full project build out going to look like? How are we going to use this building? And what next steps are ahead of us, and how are we going to phase the improvements? That was the updated portion of this previous historic structure report. So that shaded area where that's circled that's all new construction, potential new construction, because we don't have any of it yet. But one of the most challenging parts of this project is we've got 7 different levels, and we're trying to be accessible. Make all of those levels accessible. You can see some different studies here. The access issues into the building, how would circulation occur, how would control for the community center functions and the museum functions, how would those work? That yellow star in the, near the center is where the elevator is proposed, and that hasn't changed. That's actually been consistent throughout all these different concept studies that were explored. How are we going to use the 3rd floor? Would it be offices? Would it be a separate apartment? Would it be archives? All ahead to be determined. If there was a full build-out, new construction in the courtyard, what impact would that have on the overall building, the overall project? This is a very recent study that we did looking at accessibility into the building on a more limited basis. And okay, well, we can't get an elevator yet, but how do we get people into the 1st floor at least and eliminate those barriers? So what we've accomplished in 20 years, 21, is the exterior of the buildings are good. The building envelopes are sound, there's no more water coming in. The site water is under control. Into the interior, we've got 1st floor retail is open to the public, that oven room is open to the public, and that 2nd floor gallery, which has been fully rehabbed, is open to the public. And what are we going to do next? Well, we're going to still keep working on accessibility, initially to the 1st floor, as I showed. We have some schemes from that accessibility study. Upper floors, short-term, upper floors, long-term. I think one of the biggest questions is how's the interpretation of this family and this structure? And Kira's going to speak more to that as she's going to speak more to that in a couple minutes. What about the oven room? What about the family apartment? How do they work, and how do we want to tell the story there? Lots of code issues, lots of construction issues. They accommodating fire safety and electrical improvements, as well as stabilizing the interior, the 2nd interior stair, is critical to getting people up into the building as well. So when does that fit in? What about the courtyard, and what about the archives? So the building is, of course, our largest artifact. And second to that is this oven. And it will be a very interesting project when we're ready for it to see how does this oven fit into the overall picture, the overall story that this building and this space wants to tell. How do we make this more broadly open to the public and yet retain its history? And again, I think that's a great similarity between this project and the sewer house. So my portion of the presentation is done. And we'll hear from now the new executive director.
Thank you, Marilyn. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kira Manso-Brown, Executive Director of the Reher Center. And you've heard a lot about our preservation work up to this point. You heard from Marissa about where we are situated physically, historically. And so I actually want to zoom out, or sort of zoom over a bit, and talk a little bit about what's the vision and what informs it, right? How do we think about community in doing what we do? How do we think about community across time? And how does that inform our work? So you are looking at the first home demolished during urban renewal in 1966. We're looking at a building being torn down, but we are also looking at a community of people standing in front of that home together. And maybe they were standing with family or friends, just neighbors that they like nodded to or waved to. But surely in this moment, they had a sense of community that was real, and maybe also a sense of impending doom, right? Like, my house is going to be next. And so we know that preservation can be a remedy to that feeling, to that loss, but not everyone sees it that way, particularly those who have not had the benefit of it. So preservation is sometimes read as, elitist, velvet rope nostalgia, but that's not what we do at the Reher Center. We are rooting our work when preservation is done well, it is rooted in the people, not just the buildings. And so this is a signifier of what was valued in that moment, what wasn't valued, and the omission that is that part of the neighborhood that Marissa showed, where there is a gaping hole. And so we know that our work is meaning making, right? It's not just meaningful. It's meaning making. We are in a position to make meaning of architectural and cultural inheritance. And while our building was the home to the Reher family, it was also very much a site of community then, as it is now. So you see the Rehers, but you also see a haberdashery, and you see the local Italian barbershop. And so these were part of an ecosystem. People would have had a trim and a shave and then gone to buy rolls up the street. The community institutions like this have always been porous. The Reher Bakery was a porous space. It wasn't just a home. People were always moving in and out of it. So our mission includes fostering a kind of belonging among our visitors today. We know that our work is future-facing. We want to construct just futures that include all the histories, not just the grand ones. And so I have this up for a bunch of reasons. I could get into paper ephemera and all the things I think about this, but one thing that's interesting for me when I look at this is knowing Reher Bakery is up the street and seeing that we have the trolley, we have the requisite trolley dodgers, we have automobiles and horse-drawn carriages. So even in this one particular moment, we have a whole bunch of layers of stories in this neighborhood, people who would have had very different experiences. So we do our preservation work in service to interpretation, in service to education and activating our community. And you've seen our preservation work and the arc of it. We tell the history of the neighborhood, sometimes literally through our bricks, because there were brickyards down the hill. Neighbors were making bricks. They became this building. It wasn't built for the Rehers. It wasn't made as, built as a bakery, but it was literally built with working class immigrant labor, right? That production, those bricks were baked down the hill. And so while some museums and other organizations are doing this really important work of thinking about what stories do we need to bring in, what are the immigrant, the working class, marginalized stories that we need to think about, it's baked in for us. And I'm sorry, I have like all of the bakery puns, but I promise they're not on the rise from this point out. So, one project that Marilyn didn't speak as much about, or maybe actually not at all, is the restoration of our Spring Street doors. They are around the corner from the bakery storefront, and for me, these are really like main character features. They were a place where the Reher family spent a lot of time. And they portraited themselves here in front of these doors. The doors served as the entrance to their home above the gallery, and they took photos in different configurations, and across time and different seasons, and when people came to visit them, and maybe when they had new holiday outfits. And we know that they also sat outside these doors on what would become Spring Street Beach. That's how it was known in the neighborhood. And they were really like eyes on the street here, right? So they were watching their neighbors would interact with them, and they were a fixture. We also know that bakery work is hard labor, so they, when they had downtime, they just went right outside to be part of their community. We interpret our spaces, we bring educators and students in. Sometimes we do literal preservation education. We hosted folks talking about tax credits there, and we activate our site as much as possible. We bring as many folks into as many spaces that are open and safe for the public. We have a variety of public programs, and we know that storytelling is key to what we do here. So we partner with with the Place Corps. We do oral history training with them. They come back and tell stories for their graduation. It is lovely. We host scholars and authors. Amitabh Kumar, who's actually a professor at Vassar College down the road here in Poughkeepsie, came to visit us. And so we bring together our community in a variety of ways. We host exhibitions. We are a museum. We have a current exhibition of 5 immigrant artists. If you're in the neighborhood of Kingston, feel free to stop by tomorrow and visit our gallery. And as we look to the future, we are excited to grow the areas of the building that are interpreted, and we are excited to bring these objects that seem mundane and ordinary stacked in a corner to life, to tell stories through them, stories of Spring Street Beach. And we also know that accessibility, right, we are a historic house museum, so as a house, we want to provide a radical welcome to everybody. We know that we'll do our work more fully when we're able to bring all of our community in with us, not because of compliance, but because it is fundamental to what we choose to do in our values. And I'm going to close on this object. It is an intercom. It is one that would have been on every floor of the building. And in 1960, Sadie Reher would have picked that up, and her sister Molly was downstairs in the bakery, and she let Sadie know that there was a man attempting to rob them. And Molly held fast. She didn't open the till. And the man was upset, and they didn't just sell bread at the time, they sold canned goods, and he starts hurling them at her, and she lets out cries for help. And a man came in off the street, a man named Leroy Williams, who lived on Ann Street, and he intervened and saved her from what could have been a really serious assault. The police came, he was arrested. It turns out he was an Arizona man, not a Kingston neighbor, but a Kingston neighbor saved her, right? And this object allows us to tell the story of that experience of communication among the family, communication out onto the street. And it turns out that Leroy lived on a street there in 1960, a home and a street not there in 1970, right? So through this object, we're able to pull on a lot of threads, tell a really great story. And at the Reher Center, we're going to continue to invite in our community, hopefully under very different circumstances, but we know that we need to bring in our community fully to build a more just and welcoming future story together. Thank you.
Okay, thank you to all of our speakers. I'm going to invite them to sit up here. We're going to do a quick Q&A for a few minutes. I'm also just going to remind you all that this session is eligible for AIC.